So who is this polarizing figure, and what is going on with this mask? Today, we explore Master Yi, Wuju Bladesman. Hi, I'm Patrick. Welcome to Runeterra Tourist. I don't know anything about these people, so let's learn about them together. This episode, we're taking a look at one of the more polarizing figures, depending on whether you were in the lower levels or the higher levels of League of Legends. From my understanding, it would seem like he would either get endless nerfs or buffs, depending. But I only really know about him from Proving Grounds and having played with that introductory deck a little bit. Also seeing that he was one of the more dominant legends in set 1. Finals were always either him and Kaisa, Master Yi, final of Master Yi, Kaisa. It just seemed continuous until people discovered Annie, of course. So I'm hoping that there's something more to his backstory other than some westernized version of a generic Eastern warrior coded kind of lore. I'm hoping that maybe he doesn't just speak in platitudes and that there's something reasonable about this weird visor that he wears, or the fact that he has a goatee, even though I prefer full beards. So did his lore change anything? Let's dive in. Born in Wuju, the province of Baral, Ionia, I'm sure I'm absolutely saying that correctly, his parents were swordsmiths, and so he grew up watching warriors bringing in blades with poems to their names into the workshop. Not just swords, but poetry of the swords, which was a huge Wuju tradition, being as philosophical as much as it is martial. So we're still a little in tropish territory. We'll continue. He trained under Wuju masters and became known as Young Master Yi, but he was forbidden to leave with his blade. Wuju tradition is that they consider their swordsmanship too precious to ever draw blood. So kind of ironic that they have this whole fighting style that is just so revered, but it is not supposed to actually be used in combat. All right, so we're still kind of toeing the line there of tropishness. We'll continue. On a separate note, apparently the story of the 7 lenses is that they were a Wuju artifact made by Master Doran, and so it's part of Yi's inheritance and into the culture, not necessarily a fashion choice, but one lens sees into the spirit realm, and then the other 6 are deliberately left vague. There's no explanation, which can either be frustrating or poetic, however you want to interpret it. An interesting note, though, is that in the original lore, Heimerdinger was apparently the creator of these lenses, which makes absolutely no sense. He's on a completely different part of the world, like different culture. Riot apparently spent like a decade reworking this and eventually landed on Master Doran, something a little bit more applicable. But an interesting note about Master Doran is that apparently he had learned this craftsmanship from Ornn, which is a legend in Riftbound as well. So maybe a future rabbit hole to dive down. So Master Yi gets older, trains harder. I'm sure you can imagine the training montage that takes place. But eventually, Noxus invades Ionia, and so Yi, seeing the smoke on the horizon, decides to forego Wuju tradition and defends his homeland. And this is the first time that the style was actually used in combat, which is an interesting note now that I think about it. Like, this is a revered for combat, and it's the first time it's been used. We'll get to that later. So he was apparently just devastating. He was a one-man army in some iterations of his story, and then there's another iteration that says that he was so inspiring that others had joined him, or he had apparently rallied enough warriors in Wuju to join him in this one. Continuity, what is that? But the Noxians identified Wuju as a threat, and specifically because of its effectiveness decided that they would use chemicals to attack and destroy the village of Wuju while he was away at Navori, another part of the ongoing battle with Noxus. So eventually Yi returns after the battle with Noxus to find his village completely decimated, and realizing that he is the sole survivor of Wuju. The story likes to note that he is the last physical survivor, but he was slain in spirit. Sure. But instead of seeking revenge, he carries this heavy weight of grief around with him, realizing that Wuju dies with him. And so he wants to teach it to others, but doesn't find many who would be worthy enough to carry on the tradition. And then a persistent monkey appears, this Vastaya, who challenges him to duels repeatedly, constantly returning with these reinvented tricks. Yi eventually accepts him as a student, names him Wukong, and gives him an enchanted staff, which certainly sounds like future Riftbound legend material. We'll have to keep an eye on that one. But Yi's purpose being finding the peace within rather than seeking revenge is an interesting angle. Sort of skirts the stereotypes. We have the master swordsman in Yasuo and Yone apparently being some of the best swordsmen in Ionia. Something we'll have to kind of keep an eye on for future iterations of this lore exploration. So now let's take a look at the cards, and this will be interesting because this is our first repeat champion, which is kind of interesting since it didn't really take long for that to take place. But I want to explore set 1's cards versus set 3's cards to see how well they follow the lore, see if there's the real flavor of Master Yi's backstory involved in this, and how his fighting style is utilized from League of Legends and Legends of Runeterra, if you want to say, and how that ports into Riftbound. So we'll start with the legend from Proving Grounds, Wuju Bladesman, which reads, while a friendly unit defends alone, it gets +2 might. I suppose this is playing more into the original lore that Master Yi had, fighting alone against the Noxus invaders, but this feels a little bit more like a miss based off of his League of Legends abilities. From my understanding, him being an attacker that strikes with this lightning speed teleportation kind of mechanism, I guess, whatever. This feels like a legend ability that only really rewards defending, not really focusing on that attacking aspect of it. So a little bit of a hit or miss, literally. Moving on to a signature spell that can be played at reaction speed, you choose a friendly unit, and the next time it dies this turn, recall it exhausted instead. So my understanding is his abilities in League of Legends tend to be a little bit more aggressive, and this feels defensive. But I guess there are other abilities that he has that would also kind of count as this, except they're called something completely different. My understanding is that Highlander is supposed to be that breaks neck speeds, making him unstoppable kind of spell, and this seems to miss on that front. So kind of interesting, but I guess this is why we don't really see it in play in Riftbound either, also because it's 4 energy, which is pretty expensive in this card game. His champion unit in green is Master Yi Meditative, which reads, when you have 8+ runes, I have +4 might. And so this flat stat buff feels like it really didn't have any thematic connection to anything. I guess this is going to be emulated a little bit better in future sets. Spoiler alert for a couple minutes down the line. But this feels a little bit more like resilience under pressure kind of thing, but it takes a while to get 8 runes, 4 turns really. And so this kind of just feels like it's pasted on, and probably another reason why he doesn't really see a lot of play. The one that reluctantly sees play for most of Master Yi up until this point is Master Yi Honed, the orange champion unit, which has ganking and is pretty expensive. So ganking is a pretty useful aspect for a lot of units, the ability to be able to move from one battlefield to another. So I guess that helps emulate the Master Yi abilities of being able to practically teleport from one side of the battlefield to another. That's literally all this card has, and it's pretty expensive at 7 energy and 1 power with only 6 might. So it feels like the closest to what Master Yi is capable of in his lore, and in the game, but otherwise pretty vanilla. So it appears to me that set 1 was more of Riot trying to get their game design legs underneath them as they figure out what Riftbound's going to be, how it ties in with lore for these specific legends, and what can be ported over from League of Legends to their card game. And so it seems like they were still figuring out the vibe and what the character was really going to translate to, which leads us to set 3, where they now introduce this mechanic of XP. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the rules explained explainers or the new mechanism explainers at a future date, but for now, I'll briefly explain what XP is. So units are given the hunt keyword, which allows it to gather XP, this new resource that's being introduced in this set, and it's going to be placed on an XP tracker token. So you can gain XP, which gains levels, and you can unlock card abilities depending on what your level is. And Master Yi, Poppy, and Kha'Zix are going to be some of the legends that will utilize this ability. With that, we start with the Wuju Master, the legend for this upcoming set, and it reads, level 6, your units have +1 might, and at level 11, your units enter ready. So already we're seeing this capability of, as the game progresses, Master Yi and those around him get stronger. This feels like it ties more with the enhanced lore, where he was able to rally people around him to fight off Noxus. So better design, better flavor fit, and I feel like Master Yi is going to be one of those where, as he learns more about his capabilities, growing into his role as a master and purveyor of the Wuju style, then he's able to become more powerful. So feels a little bit more on brand, so to speak. Moving on to his signature spell, we see Alpha Strike, the polarizing and notorious ability from League of Legends. In this case, it's an action where you choose a friendly unit and it deals damage equal to its might, split among enemy units at battlefields, and then for each unit this kills, you gain an XP. So this right here builds onto that ability of gaining XP, growing in strength for Master Yi as he gains experience. The champion kills, extending his capabilities even further, and almost like the teleportation aspect that I had mentioned earlier about how he's able to strike multiple units in a battlefield at once. This feels like it really hits the nail on the head here, and so I think this is the strongest flavor translation that he's gotten in his time in Riftbound, basically. So we'll likely see Alpha Strike used a lot more than the iterations of Highlander that basically didn't see any play. And moving on, we'll see the champion unit, Master Yi Tempered. This is the unit that has the Hunt 2 ability, so when he conquers or holds, he gains 2 XP, and at level 6, he has Deflect and Ganking. So this again goes on to what I was talking about before about his League of Legends ability, where he is practically unstoppable. He builds up all of this power and energy to strike down opponents quickly, and also becomes shielded. And that's what we have here with Deflect and Ganking, which I think fits way more with the flavor of Master Yi, how he was in League of Legends, with a little bit of the lore, his ability to be this master of the Wuju style. So this seems like a pretty solid unit. We'll see how much this gets used in Riftbound, given that it has that sweet spot of 4 energy and no power required to actually play it, but solid work for a rare all around. Finally, we get to the epic, the green champion unit, Master Yi Unstoppable, and this one's got a lot of text on it. As you can see, pretty expensive at 12 energy and 3 power, but as you get to the different levels and progress, he becomes more accessible, which feels a little bit more on brand with his abilities in League of Legends. So this is a super interesting way to add the flavor to Master Yi, given that he has those abilities of practically being shielded as he starts to power up in the game. Level 16 is going to be pretty hard to get to, so this really means that you need to focus on the hunt abilities and gaining all the XP, but I feel like that's what Master Yi is more focused on in League of Legends from what I've been able to understand and interpret, and this character seems to fit that mold a little bit better than what we saw in the Proving Grounds set. So you can already see that by set 3, Riot's starting to figure out how to utilize some of the League of Legends abilities for these legends and champion units into Riftbound. And so we're seeing a little bit more of that flavor being infused with these characters and units and spells, but we're also seeing a little bit more of the lore being implemented in some of these as well. So doing a much better job than when they first started out with set 1. So getting to what I think about Master Yi, I kind of went into it not knowing anything about him other than he was crushing the set 1 meta, and he seemed a little goofy. I wasn't really sure what to make of him. I felt like he was going to be just another generic Eastern trope kind of warrior, but I like the idea of his grief and guilt frame instead of it just being out for revenge and the very stereotypical items of a warrior seeing his homeland decimated. And as far as his cards go in Riftbound, I liked set 3 way better than set 1. I feel like they fit the flavor and the personality of Master Yi and what he's supposed to be much better. It also seems like the mechanics are a little bit more interesting, not just pasted on and something that they needed to do for a introductory starter set. So already Riot is showing that they are doing a much better job of infusing League of Legends into this card game and doing a better job of introducing the lore for those of us who may not be so familiar with these characters, although I still do kind of find them a little generic and a little tropish, and the visor thing is still a little weird. But other than that, I don't know if I'm going to be playing him personally as much as it doesn't really fit my playing style, and that's just a personal thing, but I am at least able to respect where he is now and what he is. So how did I do? What did I miss? And to the longtime League of Legends players, how did Riot do in porting over Master Yi's mechanics into Riftbound? I plan to knock out all of the legends for the pre-Rift events before the Unleashed launch in May. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, make sure to do the whole subscribe thing that YouTube loves you to do.